The inventor's name was Ottmar Mergenthaler.
Otto Morgenthaler.
Ottmar Mergenthaler.
Ottmar Ludwig Mergenthaler.
The TH is not pronounced, it's just Mergenthaler.
He was a watchmaker, I think, by profession, watch and clockmaker, so he was used to dealing with precision engineering work.
If he built pieces and parts for a wristwatch, they had to be exactly right. You couldn't have them a little too big, a little too small. You're not going to keep time that way.
He takes night courses in electricity and mechanics and starts to realize that he's going to be drafted into the Prussian army.
He did not want that to happen. His parents didn't want that to happen, and they finally made some arrangement where he was sent out of the country.
He comes to the United States in 1872. In fact, he comes off the ship called the SS Berlin, where he came over in steerage with a wooden suitcase, and it was at a place called Locust Point in Baltimore, where some years later he would have his own factory.
He made something that was right, and you could repeat it exactly the same. And there's a lot of watchmaking qualities in that linotype machine.
He was the creative genius behind this. Somebody else gave him the germ of the idea, but it was his genius that made the linotype and made it successful.
Son of humble parents, apprentice clockmaker, immigrant, skilled craftsman, inventor in 1886 of a machine that revolutionized an industry. A machine that pulled the mind of humanity forward 1,000 years in the space of a generation.
The linotype gave you the mechanization so that one person could do the work of six.
It could set type 6 times faster than a man could, and you didn't have to throw the type back into a type case when you were finished.
The hand compositors, the typesetters, when they heard, oh, there's a machine going to come and replace you, they started to worry, I'm sure, because they thought, oh, we're going to be out of a job. But no such thing.
Because the linotype was such an effective device and it replaced all these people, within a decade after the linotype, they were up to the same number of people they had with handset type. Because the linotype generated so much need for typesetting for books and magazines and newspapers.
The way that this machine transformed information is probably its most significant achievement.
If you look at literacy in the United States before the linotype and after the linotype, there's a gigantic jump, because now you can set type faster. And because you can set type faster, you can print faster. So you look then at the number of books published in the United States after the linotype. Look at the number of magazines. Look at the number of new newspapers that started.
It was important because it made printing that much more affordable to the masses, not just in America, but around the world.
Without the linotype machine and the speed that it came up with, you would not have the communication system that you have now.
It's really something to think that just a machine that makes letters from a German immigrant from Baltimore could have such a deep effect on people and society.
I'm Davin Kunze. I'm 34 years old. I'm a linotype operator. I have people come in to see the shop. We have students come in from schools all the time, and they're in awe. They have no idea what this thing is or how it works, and I show them how the type is distributed back into the magazines, and it's magic. I like the fact that it's old. I like the fact that the way it works. It's not like a computer that I look at and I don't understand how the circuit boards are, making stuff do what it does. I'm incredibly happy that I know how it works. It's very impressive to the women.
The operations necessary to produce a slug or line of type are divided into 3 groups: composition of the matrix line, casting of the slug, distribution of the matrices. The operator, depressing the keys, releases matrices from the magazine channel. The matrices are delivered to the assembling elevator in the correct sequence. Here's a close-up of some mats. You can see the letter that has been punched or engraved into which the molten type metal is going to be injected. The line of matrices is sent to the casting unit. Against the opening of this mold, the mat will fit perfectly. The plunger injects the molten type metal into the mold. the slug is ejected into the galley. At the same time, the mattresses are transferred to the second elevator and raised to the distributor. Here, they are returned to their respective channels in the magazine.
I mean, it's incredible, and it's incredible the thought power that went into figuring out how this machine works. I can't even wrap my head around it reading the manuals, let alone try to figure it out.
We would call this a type matrix, and this is, of course, a size to explain to people because it has to be seen.
The mats, see, the little mats, the little things like this, and they come in all different sizes.
The heart and soul of the linotype machine is the matrix.
This small piece of brass performs a vitally important job. It's a matrix, a mold for a letter. It forms, together with other matrices, a word in type. And then a line of words in type, a linotype.
This is what sets the type. This is why it's a typesetting machine. Everything else is to make this work.
This is a mat that actually went through 60 different processes to be manufactured.
The tooth combination in every matrix matched up to the channel in the magazine. So as the matrices went to the top, they went along a distributor bar and then fell back into the proper channel.
I'll sometimes be setting line after line of type, and then I just stop and kind of stare at the return and watch them drop down. And then realize I'm supposed to be doing work.
A steel wedge known as a spaceband is assembled between one word and the next.
At one point, when the line goes over to be cast, it forces the wedge up, and as it goes up, it expands the space between the words, justifying everything to the left and right-hand margin.
Strange keyboard, if you don't know anything about the keyboard, has 90 keys on it. It starts out with the most used letter, which is a lowercase e, and it goes E, T, A, O, I, N, S, H, R, D, L, U, C, M, F, W, Y, P, V, B, G, K, Q, J, X, Z.
So Otmar put all the lowercase letters on one side based on frequency of letter use, all the caps on the other side, and everything else in the middle. So you look at the keyboard, it's E, T, A, O, I, N, S, H, R, D, L, U, Etern-Sherdlu. Now the reason that became famous was there's no backspace key or delete key on a linotype. If you made a mistake, when you started typing and you made a mistake, you started in the wrong line or whatever, you couldn't abort easily. So what you would do is run your finger down the first two rows of keys, and then when the slug came out and it said Etern-Sherdlu, you'd throw it back in the pot, no one would know what was going on. But what would happen, as fate would have it, is that that would wind up in print. And so all through the 20s and 30s and 40s, that was a big joke in the printing industry. Who is Etern-Sherdlu?
The linotype machine was important on several aspects. On the most important of all of them is its contribution to journalism. Because whether things are looking nice or not, the ability to have a newspaper coming out every day is non-negotiable.
This is a shrine to the First Amendment, and part of that is the history of news. That's where we are right now. We're in the news gallery at the museum. Right behind me, you'll see things from front pages from 1940 to 1945. We're seeing all of World War II right here. And every one of these papers was set with a linotype machine by a guy, probably in a very hot room, really squinting to get every single word right.
So linotype was able to take the words of a few people and make them available for a larger audience because it made newspaper production possible.
It's this machine that made it possible for newspapers to print 2, sometimes even 3 editions a day.
The newspapers went from 8 pages to 48 pages, like almost overnight.
The cost of newspapers was driven down. It used to be a dime and a nickel a piece. Pretty soon you saw the New York papers selling for a penny a piece.
You can take longer stories, you can take more stories, you can print more often, you can print faster.
They had to have content that would attract readers. Therefore, the stories became more salacious, the headlines became larger. If it involved a murder or sex or gambling, it was sure to draw readers in.
Even today, with the gossip channel, TMZ.com, Twitter, they got to know now the latest joke, the latest have you seen it, the latest web video, viral or what have you. I mean, it's the instantaneousness of the fact that drives the business.
The need to read, which stirs the very souls of men, is more evident in the present era of progress than ever before. Publishers, bookstores, and newsstands pour out thousands of books, magazines, and newspapers every day to inform, instruct, and amuse. The greater part of these printed materials are made possible by various types of mechanical typesetting. Machines which set type up in line, cast from molten metal, first introduced at the close of the last century, are now the most widely used.
Linotype was one of the most profitable companies you can possibly imagine. Newspapers had to buy machines, they had to buy new fonts, they had to buy mats that wore out, they had to buy parts for the machine, they had to buy service for the machine where it was necessary. The Linotype company was a cash cow. Beginning in 1886, the Linotype spread rapidly through the United States and Canada, but almost simultaneously in Western Europe and the English-speaking world because of the British Empire. And by 1928, the Linotype reigned supreme as the primary typesetting device throughout the world. But Mergenthaler's biggest problem is he can't stop inventing. He keeps improving the machine. He keeps coming up with new ideas, and the problem is the investors want to be able to ship machines and make money from them. He ruled with an iron hand. Just the way he ruled his workers at the newspaper, he ruled everybody at the company. Whitlaw Reid wanted to make money very fast. Otmar didn't want to build the machines that fast.
There's a picture of Whitlaw Reid standing next to Mergenthaler. He was listening to what Mergenthaler said, but Mergenthaler was not an equal to him.
So they start to become at loggerheads. It gets to a point where Reid starts really hitting the machine as being bad. The machine's not doing what it's supposed to do.
What he was doing that for was basically, he thought the stock price would go lower, he would buy more of it. He wanted to control the whole thing himself, and all the records that are still out there are very ashamed. You should be ashamed of what he was doing.
Otmar was a perfectionist. And again, he couldn't stop inventing. This is another thing that drove Reid crazy. Reid had his own set of problems. He was a taskmaster. He was demanding. He wanted everything immediately. He put a lot of pressure on Mergenthaler, but Mergenthaler put a lot of pressure on himself.
But he also had the problem of working very, very late at night. He had a family to take care of and afford. And with all of those things, his health began to go.
Otmar Mergenthaler unfortunately died of tuberculosis when he was about 44. He didn't live to see the great success that the Linotype eventually became.
If he deserves anything, he deserves the respect of being the person that we should be. Thank you for what you've done. You put the world 300 years ahead by inventing the Linotype machine.
It's almost the story of the American dream. He comes to America with nothing. He goes on to invent the machine that will change the world. And yet, almost no one knows who he was.
That's the first question people ask me when they find out I'm the public printer. They want to know if I print money, and I say no. And then they say, well, can you get me my passport? And I say no, and then they just move on.
We print the Congressional Record, the Federal Register. We print the Code of Federal Regulations.
We've printed every significant historical document in the life of the nation since 1861. So our first big historic job was probably the printing of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862. The stumbling block in terms of efficiency and speed was that we set everything by hand. And when we really turned the equation around from minutes per line to lines per minute, our work here just exploded.
Well, the linotype battery GPO, as far as I know, was probably the largest in the world. I think there was about 150 in total throughout the building. And it was just something to see, all of those machines lined up all the way full length of the building. And the noise was pretty loud, all those machines running at one time, pinging away, and men shouting and moving around. And it was almost like a ballet of machinery and men moving around, trying to get this thing done, because every night the record, had to get out.
It's just fascinating how every piece is an integral part of one action leads to another action, and I've just found that to be interesting as hell. I was a linotype machinist. I repaired them. Worked with a head machinist who was a little reluctant on teaching me at first because he knows I had 2 fingers gone, so he didn't ever figure I'd be able to do it. He used to go out for lunch every day, and while he was gone for lunch, of course I had to cover the 11 machines, I'd make sure I took one of them apart. And when he came back, he'd see that I had taken it apart, and he'd hit the roof, but that was okay. He had to put it back together again. In the meantime, I was looking over his shoulder, getting, garnishing all of his knowledge. What's really nice is when you come across some of the old timers that used to run these machines and stuff. They just, they love it when they see a running machine. They'll be out in the vestibule there or in the hallway, and you hear the click, 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 and all of a sudden they're attracted like mice to cheese, okay, coming in the door because they hear that sound.
You've got the clink of the matrices as they fall down into the assembling tray. You've got the sounds of the mold disc being pushed up against it. You've got all 13 cams spinning at the same time. You're adding all of these different sounds to the whirring sound that's been going, reassuring you that the machine is on and that it's working right.
The whir, and you hear just a little tap noise. Click, click, there's a clink, which is the space band. Click. The elevator moves down, you hear it go clink, clink, and then you hear the sound of a shh, and then that last line comes out and goes clunk and drops in place.
And then that's followed by the cascade of mats as they fall back down into the distributor, down into the magazine. And you hear that brass against brass sound as the mats hit each other.
You'd hear clink, 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 wherever that mat was going to drop.
It's just a cacophony of sound, but it's in its own a linotype symphony.
And that's the sound that they grew up with, something that they did for years.
If your mouth keeps your hands from working, keep it shut. So that's a pretty good motto.
These people that ran them were really irreplaceable. I mean, you just couldn't put anybody down at a machine and say, you do this. It took several years to really become a decent printer at a linotype machine, and really many, many more years to become really a good operator.
Linotype compositors were the preeminent laborers of their day.
This wasn't just a job. This whole thing in this newspaper age, it was a calling. It was something bigger.
They were the artists. They were the people that created this wonderful, beautiful typography that we try and emulate today digitally.
The people who operated them were talented, artistic people posing as industrial types in dirty coveralls,
They saved you from making stupid errors, especially those guys the compositors really saved you from making stupid errors from upstairs. And sometimes the guys in composing would find an error in the story while they were putting it in and say, did you mean to say he was guilty? Because everything in this seems to say he's not guilty. What did the jury say? Was he guilty? Oh, I forgot to put not in, and it went through everybody, and they never caught it. But you know who caught it? The guy down there with the cigar that's putting it in.
The goal was pick up your paper at the door of your house, 7 o'clock in the morning. That's the goal. And you wouldn't care how you worked it or how you did it at night or when you went to press. That's your problem. Our problem is we want a paper there in the morning, first thing.
You had a deadline on Thursday, and you didn't dare miss that deadline, because if you missed that deadline, they couldn't print the paper. Then if the paper didn't get printed, it couldn't get in the mail. It'd get in the mail, the prescribers wouldn't get their paper till late, and they wouldn't like that. So it was a vicious cycle. It was not easy, but it was fun.
I was sitting there at my machine doing some classified advertising, I guess, and along came some people. I could see them from a distance. The foreman of the composing room then came over to me, and he said, "Carl," he says, "we have some visitors." He brought all the people over, and then there was this woman, and he says, "Oh yes," he says, "and this is Marilyn Monroe." He could have been knocking me out of my chair if he wanted to, but I took the shock. I said, "Okay, Marilyn Monroe and anybody else, you still all have to learn something about the machine at once." And I set up a linotype in her name. I said it in boldface, so I know she would like that. And I gave it to her, and I said, "This is your name on the piece." And she looked at it, and everybody else was looking at it and looking at me, I guess. And she said, "Thank you very much." And she kissed me on top of my head, because I'm sitting down here, and she's standing over me. And I said to myself, there goes the day. That's all they're going to talk about now today is my head.